7 years on active duty. Civil engineer, naval engineer. Been afloat for 3 years. Chased bass fishing all around the Pacific. And been to Tokyo and Portugal and some different places. But finally settled back here around 2004, 2005, helped my father out. My father is the last family that lived on the original homestead of Levin and Cherry still, out in Chemung, and we'll talk about that briefly. That's a little bit of my background. I'm now a project engineer, project manager for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Been back with them for about 3 or 4 years now. And so what's great about it is that I get enough time off so I can go do this kind of stuff. So thank you for your tax dollars. But yeah, I've had a journey. But this is the passion that I do. And it'll probably come out as I talk. So, first, this slide here. This headstone is located up in Chemung, off of 541, and it's a small burial plot where my third great grandparents, Levin and Cherry, still are supposedly buried. And the picture here is an actual picture of William Still. This is his brother, Dr. James Still, and they had a brother named Peter Still that was left in slavery and survived 45 years of slavery and to reunite with his family. I just can't go and glance over the fact that my ancestors were enslaved Africans. They were captured from Africa and brought here to America. So we need to talk about how and why. I would be wrong for not talking about it. We know in the 17th and 18th century, tea, coffee, and tobacco became a social pattern in England. It just wasn't for the wealthy, but for mass consumption. The English consumption of sugar increased 150 years, by 2,500% by the early 19th century. Sugar was a very hard, laborious product to produce, and you needed people, labor to do it. Sugar cane first got harvested and sent back to Spain from the West Indies in 1516. So became the slave trade from the west coast of Africa into Brazil and North America and the Caribbean. We know in 1619 a Dutch ship transported 20 Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. We also know in 1664 the Concessions and Agreement Act offered 60 acres of land for every enslaved African imported into New Jersey, which helped increase the population of slave population. Food for thought. I saw this in a movie. I gotta look back up what movie it was, or a documentary, but it was a very interesting statement. It said that many people think that the African history started with slavery, but better said, the African history was interrupted by the transatlantic slave trade. So my history doesn't start with slavery. It started with the fact that there was millions of people that lived in a continent of Africa. That slide didn't show up too good. But this is England over here. This is Africa. This is West Africa, where they got the slaves from, and this is where they produced a lot of the product over in South America, Brazil, the Caribbean, and North America. That's why you see so many people of mixed culture, mixed race in Brazil. A lot of Africans. There were a lot of sugar plantations and tobacco plantations in Brazil, and the Caribbean was kind of the stopping point where they brought slaves. They brought enslaved Africans in and got them back to health, to take them to America, to put them on the auction block. This is another slide, kind of the same thing. I've checked my DNA, and I'm primarily 75% from this area of Nigeria, Senegal, and Gambia, and Ghana. I'm hoping one day to actually travel to get a chance to go to the west coast of Africa. We know in 1677, the first Quaker settlers arrived in Burlington and Gloucester counties. In 1683, there was a man named John Hug who purchased from those settlers 1,300 acres of land located in Gloucester County. Within the bounds of his plantation, there was a small community of enslaved Africans known as Guineatown, which is located in Brooklyn, Belmore, and Mount Ephraim, New Jersey. 1761, the slave ship Hannah transported a cargo of slaves from the coast of Guinea and auctioned in the Delaware River. 1797, the Guineatown small community of freed slaves located within the area of Hug Plantation. In 1800, there was 80% of Burlington County, New Jersey, and 90% of Gloucester County. The black population was free. And that was primarily because of the Quakers. Quakers around 1787 decided that slavery was not the right thing, and they abolished slavery within the order of the Quaker religion. So in order to stay a Quaker, you had to release free your slaves. 1804, New Jersey passed this act of gradual abolition of slavery, which meant that males would become free at the age of 25, and females would become free at the age of 21. And if you were born of a slave, an enslaved African, that was you were born a slave. Even if your father was white or your father was free, it was your servitude or your class became what your mother was. Unfortunately, when people got close to their age, some of these slave owners sold their slaves further south to keep them enslaved and also to recoup the money. And understand that this 25 and 20 years of age was what was considered an economic break point, a break-even point for the slave owners to recoup their money for keeping their slaves and feeding them and clothing them for those number of years. So it wasn't about a moral issue, it was an economic issue. And that's why slavery lasted for as long as it did. Because the South was making their money off of free labor. And they didn't want to get rid of it. They tried to call it states' rights and all that kind of foolishness, but it wasn't about states' rights. 1861, the Civil War begins. The Confederate attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Lincoln. He only freed the slaves in the states of the rebellion against the Union. He didn't free everybody, just the ones that were in the Confederates. 1/3 of the U.S. The Union Army was African American. He needed those men to help fight the war, to win the war. 1865, the Civil War ends, and the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery throughout the nation. South Jersey, still family early beginnings. Those Guineatown residents would later move into Snow Hill.
Where's that?
Snow Hill is actually would be alongside. Some of the earliest West Jersey documented enslaved still family members date back as far as 1752. In the manumission books, manumissions is when you get your freedom papers. Burlington County Deed Book 1786 and 1800, there was a Philip, Hope, and Candace still manumitted on March 2nd, 1787 by an owner named Esther Wilkins in Eastham Township. Gloucester County Abolition Census 1798 listed as freemen of color. There was a Tab still, a Cupid still, a James still, and not the same James I will talk about later. A John still and a Bowden still. A friend of mine has documented over 90 antebellum black communities that existed before in South Jersey, that existed before the Civil War started. And that's just really a black community, over 90 of them. He's working on doing a GIS map so we can see them where the locations are. For places like Freehaven, Sattertown, Snow Hill, Colemantown, Burlington, Petersburg, Little Texas, Clarksboro, and Indian Mills. What I always found interesting about this was that Little Texas, if you're familiar with Mount Laurel and Church Road, and when it comes out of Morristown, it goes into Mount Laurel, and the underpass is for the 295 and Turnpike.
Yeah.
There's a street there called Texas Avenue. It's named after Little Texas, which is a small black community. And I knew people that grew up there when I grew up a kid, but we never realized that it was an actual black community years ago. So this place like that, you meet, you'll see in the area, and you'll find out that it was a small black community like Timbuktu. We all know about Timbuktu, right? And within these communities, there were several still families that thrived in these black communities. And this is long before my third great grandparents came here. Before. So we know that around 1804, Sidney Steele escaped twice from the plantation. Her first attempt, she took all 4 of her children. The second attempt, she had to make the heart-wrenching decision to leave 2 of her children behind. She left her 2 sons, Levin Jr. and Peter behind. In the second attempt, she fled with her 2 daughters, Mahala and Katara. I don't know how anybody, when you really think about that, can you imagine having to just say, you know what? Sorry, guys. Sorry, children. I'm leaving you behind because I can't afford to take everybody because we might get caught. So I'm going to leave you in this wretched place and hopeful that you'll make it.
How old were they?
They're around 7 or 8. And I'll talk about Peter later on. They came out of area Caroline County along the Choptank River. This area right here. On her second attempt, she reunited with her husband in Greenwich, New Jersey. And then Levin and Sidney Steele, they arrived in Chemung. Sidney changed her name to Charity. And they modified their last name to Still to hide within the other 3 Still families. So essentially, my family was grafted into the Still families that were living and thriving in South Jersey. And she changed her name because why? She was a fugitive. Levin was able to buy his freedom around 1798. Now, probably the next slide we'll talk about that. So in order to keep her identity, they changed their first name and changed their last name. Steele, close, but no relation to the Stills that were already living here. It's claimed that she had 18 children, but there's only 14 that were documented. I figured those 4 were probably stillborn, and they just named, because back then it was quite known that women would have, miscarriages or babies would be both stillborn. Yeah, 14's a lot. And what's funny for me is that my father's mother had 18 children. And the same number, 14 of them got to adulthood. And 2 were stillborn and 2 lived to about they were 4 or 5 years old.
That's still 18 pregnancies.
One person, one man, yeah.
That's hard.
The story my father tells is that they lived out in Chemung and the sheriff came out one day and they asked my grandfather that he heard there was a still out. And he had a still out on the farm. And my grandfather said, "Yeah, I got a couple of them." So he started calling my father and my aunts and uncles out. And the sheriff said, "You know what? Don't leave her smart behind alone."
So when did she die? How long did she
Good.
live? Charity with the 18 pregnancies.
Well into her 70s and 80s.
Wow.
Some of the early records on Levin Steele was this. I found him in an earlier William Banner's will, where the names of Levin and Sid were in his will. Sidney was sold to another enslaver named Alexander Griffin around 1780. the estate records of Levin in Market Banner's will, December 1788, where she gifted her Negro boy Levin to her grandson William Wood, the son of Joseph Wood. Now Joseph Wood died shortly after that, and William Wood became an orphan. But because he was an orphan, he had to account for his expenditures and how he made money during those years. And it had to be recorded in the orphan court records. So William had expenditures and earnings that were recorded in Maryland State Guardian accounts. And these were some of the entries. See here, this is Levin made $1,300 for him, 1,300 pounds for him. And this was like, he had to buy him some trousers. So all had to be written down. And these things were for Levin. Again, enslaved Africans were property. Like we treat our cars. We even treat our dogs and cats better now, right? We bring our dogs and cats to the vet. They live with us. You know, and I'm not against anybody back there who's got a service dog. I understand, but it's just amazing how you go places now. People have the dogs and they're carrying them, thinking, man, you treat your dogs better than some of your children, some of your family members. But yeah. And when I found this document in the Maryland State Archives, I teared up a bit because I really had found my third great grandfather's freedom. And it reads as such: I, William Wood of Caroline County in the state of Maryland, do hereby set free from bondage, my Negro man called Levin Steele, aged about 24 years, and do for myself and all my heirs, executors, and administrators release unto the said Levin Steele all my right and all the claim whatsoever as to persons or to any estate whatsoever may acquire, hereby declaring the said Negro man called Levin Steele absolutely free, without any interruption from me or any other persons claiming under me, in witness whereof I have hereto set my hand and seal this 22nd day of 11th month, 1798, William Wood. The day he got his freedom. And he stayed around enough to keep an eye on his wife. And he couldn't figure out how to get her free because the slave owner wouldn't sell her. So that's why she had to escape twice. Came across from Caroline County, across to Greenwich. And Greenwich now is kind of I don't want to say it's not a very booming town. But back then, I found out that it was a port. Yeah. You know, so it was a port of commerce. And in that area, there's the Springtown Othello, which is a black community. Right now, they call it the historic Bethel AME Church. You'll find that a lot of these Underground Railroad towns had AME churches that Richard Allen was setting up. And these AME churches and these communities around there were Underground Railroad stops or places where they could stay. Swedesboro is an AME church. Mount Laurel, Jacob's Chapel, and Mount Moriah here in Mount Holly. In order to hide even further, they moved out Shimon, moved into the Pine Barrens. Now, I don't know the last time you've been in a pine barren, but there's still some strange things that go on. There's still some strange things that go on in a pine barren. But I love it.
Whereabouts in Shimon was the church located?
There was a church called the Hartford Road AME Church that my grandmother, I call her my grandma, she was third grandma, she attended there. It was a small congregation. And the Hartford AME Church, the Hartford, there's the batteries. Maybe I spiked it up. I spiked it out because I talked too loud at times. So that AME church, and there was a church, there was an AME church in the Crossroads where Dr. Still lived. Later on, those two AME congregations moved to Jacob's Chapel and formed Jacob's Chapel AME. And that's how we have Jacob's Chapel AME Church out in Mount Lawrence. Now that church, they used to say for a while that the church was, my cousin Pastor Persis told a story that the church was using, wherever stopped, people hit underneath the floorboards. Sounds good, but it wasn't true, because later on when they find just some history on it, Jacob's AME, the church didn't get built to 1867. So that's why you gotta fact check stuff.
At a basic level.
Yes, at a real basic level. This document here was written for Peter Still when he finally got his freedom, and it names all of his brothers and sisters that were living. And as you see, there's actually 14 of them. This Ann Still died before they even left Maryland. And she came up, she left Levin and Peter Still, came up with Mahala and Kitty, or Katara. My second great grandfather was Samuel Still, who was born on February 26, 1807. And then Dr. James was born April 9, 1812. And William, who was the baby of the bunch, was born October 7, 1821. There's a better slide with the names transcribed, so you can actually read it. Not too many people read cursive. I've lost an act of even writing cursive because in school I always had to write in architectural block letters. But we know that my grandfather died December 24th, 1842. And in his will, he bequeathed all the estate after paying off all his debts to his wife Cherry. His son Samuel was given a farm known as Cato Bounds. James was given a 7-acre parcel of land. The remaining personal property divided among 6 remaining children was Mahala Thompson, Katara Wilmore, Mary Still, Charles Wesley Still, John Nelson Still, and William Still. 1843, there were 9 free and 1 was still enslaved. And note that's Peter, who was enslaved in 1843 and was in Alabama. And he was unbeknownst to his family that he was there. And Levin Jr., his brother, had passed away while being enslaved December 28, 1831. He was beaten pretty severely when he died from that beating. I briefly talked about Eastham Township was incorporated in 1688 by the Welsh and English Quakers. Indian Mills was known as the Brotherton Indian Reservation. The Lenni Lenape resided here, but by 1777, most of the Native Americans had left to be with the brothers and sisters up in New York State. Chemung was incorporated in 1852. Made up of areas from the surrounding townships like Eastham, Washington Township, Southampton, and Medford Township. In 1814, we know that Levin Still purchased land from a free black man named Cato Bounds. And later on, he purchased more property as time went on. As indicated on the federal state census from 1840s to 1940s, several black families lived in the nearby unincorporated towns, such as Indian Mills and Dingletown. I just saw a post this past week. Young gentleman said, I posted something a bit about Chemung, and the young gentleman said, my family lived in Chemung. And I said, really? And I said, my father knew your grandmother, your grandmother. And I said, I grew up with her. I didn't know it, but I grew up with his mother and his uncle. They had moved into Morristown. There was a Patterson family. Indian Mills was an industry in the area, was the sawmills, furnaces, and agriculture. Levin's occupation was agriculture and a woodcutter. Levin's first freeborn son inherited all his father's land. Mahala Thompson would marry a man named Gabriel Thompson, who lived nearby their homestead. Certain names like Robert's family, the Henry family, Bola, Buck, Dosey, and Dixon, and Thompson, and farmers. And I need to do some more research on those families in the area, but this was a property along, this is 541, or Stokes Road. This later would become 206. But as you see there, Estelle, and right here is Gabriel Thompson. So the daughter stayed nearby. This is a picture of my second great grandfather, Samuel Still, who was a brother of Dr. James Still and William Still. And this is my grandfather and my uncle Joseph. This had to be here around, I would say about 1910, 1911, somewhere in there. They were sweet potato farmers. My family comes from, my DNA shows that I'm basically out of the area of the west coast of Africa. The Igbo tribe grew yams. So it's not that, so it's interesting that my family would come here and become free and grow sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
Not just coincidental. In my research, I found where the two separate progenies, two separate Still progenies married into each other. 1909, it was a marriage of Cubit M. Still and a Juanetta Still. She was a granddaughter of Dr. James Still, and Cubit M. Still was a grandson of Cubit Still Sr., who was out of Esham. There's something about the Still name, it somehow comes back into Esham, and I'm still researching to see, because we haven't found any slave owners with the last name Still. Now, this is my theory. If you walk out of here and you run into another Still, and you say, oh, Sam Still told me you guys were a bunch of drunks. No. What I'm going to tell you is that in the 1600s, your last name a lot of times became what you did.
Right.
So we know on that Hug Plantation that I talked about earlier, he sold whiskey. We know that those enslaved Africans made his whiskey. So it's not too far-fetched that they were really master distillers, and they took on the last name Still. So that's my theory. It's a good theory, but it's not gospel. So you go find another Still, they tell you this man said your family's a bunch of alcoholics.
No, it's different being a distiller than actually.
Yes, and you did. In fact,
drinking all your products.
they distilled a lot of different things back then.
Yeah.
But we only think of alcohol now.
Yeah.
All right. I also know that in 1875 there was a marriage between a William Still and a Henrietta Still. William traced it back to a possible Bowman Still in Esham, New Jersey, and Henrietta Still was a granddaughter of Levin Still, daughter of Samuel Still. I found this out. I had one of my cousins, one of Samuel Still's sons' will, and in the will it had bequeathing my sister Henrietta Still and her husband William Still. And I had it for years until I started really looking at these wills and reading them carefully. And that's when I realized that he wasn't a brother or family member, he was another Still from the area. I think back then, the two families knew who their cousins were, who they were related to.
Who they weren't related to.
And who they weren't related to.
And more important.
So as time goes on, we kind of lost that connection, and everybody assumed or has assumed that every Still throughout the country is all related to Levin and Charity Still. And I say this not to create division, but if you're doing your genealogical research, that's a key point to know that
you were adopted into a family, right? You need to know this. And people just tend to go straight to Lebanon Charity in Williamsville because it's easy.
Wow.
And it's well known, it's documented, but you need to do some research. I've been kicked out of family reunion meetings. I've been threatened on Facebook. So it's all good. It's all good. I've been told, one gentleman from Lawnside said, so what are you telling me, I don't exist? I said, no, I'm not saying you don't exist. I'm saying that you connect in a different way. You're family, but you're not blood related. So I can still call you family. But you need to know that the lineage doesn't go straightly back. And we need to find that information because the story of the South Jersey Stills that were living here before Lebanon Charity got here is phenomenal. And we need to do some research and figure out what made them so prominent that they could say to my family, change your name, be part of my family. It's important because if they didn't change, if they weren't allowed to change their last name, the story could have never happened. Charity could have got recaptured and been sent back to slavery. They could have moved on and went to New York, and the story of William and James and Peter could have never ever happened. So I'm grateful for that the Still family accepted my family and allowed my parents to assimilate into their family. So the next time you meet a Still and you say, hey, I met a guy who says you're on our family. You can explain it nicely to him. So I don't get dirty emails and threatening when I go to family reunions. So much so, Edward and Mahal is still from Stonehill or Lawnside. They had a son named Charles Still who was in the Civil War. He got hurt while he was in the Civil War. Dr. James Still was their physician. So these are two affidavits because Charles Still was trying to get a pension from the Civil War, from the War Department. And in this statement it says that neither one of them are blood related to each other. This is an actual document that was found. And it was found by a Still family member on the South Jersey side of it. Like, she gave it to me about 10, 15 years ago. And we've been friends ever since, just helping each other, found out information about the families. I even done DNA testing with a gentleman named Reginald Still Sr., who was the son of Clarence Still down in Lawnside. And we share no DNA at all. And another woman who's a part of the Tracy Becker Tapp Still, we share no DNA between the two of us. And what's interesting about DNA, short story, I had a person from England kept contacting me saying, I think we're cousins, I know we're cousins. And he was a white gentleman, and I was like, okay, here we go again. And I gotta, but he stayed persistent with me. And I finally said, okay, what's your story? He said that he had a grandfather who married a woman from England, and that his grandfather was a grandson of my great-grandfather. He left here when he was 16 years old, around the late 1800s, became a merchant marine, and stayed in London and married a lady in London. So now I have this whole family in London, and we did this test. We also did it by DNA, and it came out to be one of my, I don't know how many chromosomes they shared with me. But it was really unique find, because sometimes you don't believe in DNA, and this was a very interesting find for me. So it kind of helped me believe in a little more. Okay, William Still, father of the Underground Railroad. He died in 1902, and the New York Times gave him that moniker. He didn't give it to himself. The New York Times did it. Father of the Underground Railroad. This is an actual picture of him. This right here is it's hard to see, but he's standing here and he's in front of his coal merchant business, and that's at 1216, 1218, 1220 South Washington Street, Philadelphia. He doesn't own a little acreage. He owned a whole couple addresses there. Quite a civil rights activist. He was a successful entrepreneur, sold land, ice, coal, and stoves, and quite a philanthropist in the city of Philadelphia, to say the least. He began working in the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Office in 1847, started working as a janitor and a clerk. I need to take that mailroom off there. He worked as a clerk. Clerk was a person who just did general business office duties in the office. He married a woman named Letitia. They rented a home at 17 Robinson Street, which is now present day 625 Delhi Street, South Delhi Street, from 1850 to 1855. The home was considered a way house in the part of the Underground Railroad network. They often had runaways and held meetings with key abolitionists at the home. In 1852, they reorganized the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Office, and they formed a vigilance committee, which was like a nucleus inside the committee, like a secretive, like a CAA unit or a black ops group within the office. And he was appointed the chairman. And they provided not only a network of hideouts and also money, but train tickets, food, medicine, lodging, clothing to help escape enslaved Africans. He's accounted for over 800 fugitive enslaved Africans running away, helping them in 14 years. This house is still standing.
Huh.
What's interesting when you think about it, John Brown, Harriet Tubman, Lewis Tapley, Thomas Garrett walked through that door. Walked through that door. That'll come up later, but I was fortunate to work with the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program last year. And me and some other family members got together and worked with them. And we helped design a mural that is now on this side of this building. Yes, I should have one come out. It's located, if you know where South Street's at, between 8th and 9th, between South Street and Bainbridge Avenue. He worked again like people with Thomas Garrett, Harriet Tubman, William Lloyd Garrison. Harriet Tubman didn't do any of those trips by herself. She worked in the network that William still created. And they were at odds at times, because she was determined to go back to Maryland. And she was like, I'm going back to get my people, William. I said, you can't, you're gonna mess up you're gonna disclose our information. We can't let that out. But she went anyway, so they bumped heads. They bumped heads. But William was a vital part of her operation. Have you ever seen the movie Harriet?
Yes.
The gentleman that she goes into the office and talks to?
Right.
Leslie Odom portrayed William still. Wow. Francis Allen Harper, John Brown. John Brown could vitamin still 6 months before he did the Harper's Ferry raid. And then after the raid ended, still helped his accomplices, helped his family get away. What's interesting for me was that, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, I was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I was one of the guest speakers. And they had a few descendants there of other families. And it was a family of a woman named who's descendant of John Brown. And her and her husband and I, we sat in the hotel room in the lobby one evening, and we started talking about how we got into this. And it was amazing to me to find out that when John Brown's wife left Philly, moved to California, they changed their name and forbade their family to ever talk about the fact that their father was John Brown, because of the stigmatism that he started the Civil War, in a sense, right? It's so much so that she found all this information out and went to go see a cousin of hers in Ohio. The cousin of hers gave her the information, but made her sign a document that she would not tell anybody where she got this information. It was that so much secretive. And I just thought that was amazing. I'm like, it was 2010? And your family's still worried about the fact that your grandpa started the Civil War? You should be happy. You should be proud, right? So this stuff. The Underground Railroad book that William Still wrote was the only documented book of its time that kept these narratives. It was not written 30, 40 years later from people who were in their 80s and 90s and just kind of half remember some of the stuff. When you came into his office, you were asked, where'd you come from? Who was your master? Why'd you leave? How'd you get here? Who'd you leave behind? What was your name? The whole 9 yards. And he wrote all this stuff down. And then because of the compromise, because of the 1850 compromise law, right, the great compromise between the states, which allowed slave owners to send their slave catchers up north to reclaim, to capture their slaves, William had to hide this information out in a crypt at night in the cemetery. Because if it was found out, they could use the information to capture people. No other narratives I talk about real briefly. Jane Johnson. Most people know about Henry Box Brown. You don't know about Henry Box Brown?
My granddaughter just asked me to go to the library and get that book for her.
Okay. William Allen Craft, and we're close to Henry Box Brown. His family got sold off. He lived in Richmond, Virginia. His family got sold off. He didn't know how to get hold of them. They went further south, and most times they did. They sold them further south. So he decided, well, I better get free. He became friends with a merchant in Richmond, and he came up with a plan that he would ship himself in a box, 2'8" by 2 foot by 3 foot high. It was about 5'5". On the top of the box, it said, "This side up." If you imagine, because I used to work at FedEx. I know we used to. You keep your package right down to the belly of the truck. So he was turned upside down. It took him 27 hours to get to Philly. He was upside down for 24 to that. And all he had was hardtack, which is like 5-day-old Popeye biscuits, and some water. They thought that he was going to be dead when they opened the box. He came out of the box and sung the 40th Psalm in the Bible. Now, that's on my phone, but you get home tonight, you have a Bible in your house, go back and read the 40th Psalm. And it's very appropriate why he sung that song when he came out of that box. Jane Johnson, I love her story because Jane Johnson was traveling with her slave owner, a man named Colonel Wheeler, and Colonel Wheeler was the ambassador to Nicaragua. I didn't know Nicaragua was even a country. But Nicaragua had plantations because they grew tobacco and cotton. And the southern states were trying to foster relationships with those different countries down in Central America. Because I think they saw the writing on the wall, right? But she comes to Philadelphia. Her slave owner says to her, "Don't talk to anybody." You never tell somebody don't do something. So she realized that she knew that if she came across the Mason-Dixon line with her owner, she could gain her freedom. If she came across as a fugitive or by herself, she was considered a fugitive. So she got a note to William Still in his office. William Still comes down there with his Quaker lawyer, broad daylight, in the docks, and says to her, "Come with us and you get your freedom." And her owner was like, "You can't do this. It's not property." They're like, "Just go." They snapped, they took her. They didn't snatch her. She went with them willfully. So him being the ambassador to Nicaragua, he was friends of the president at that time. I think it was Harrison or one of the presidents. I don't remember. I did go back and remember the story a little better. But the point is that it didn't go to the Philadelphia courts. It went straight from that point to the federal courts. It became a federal case right away. It skipped the whole judiciary process, right? So when William Still and Passmore Williamson went to go to court, they were forced to bring her in to give her testimony. So her owner was friends with U.S. Marshals, and there was some Philadelphia police officers on the side of the abolitionists. Now imagine you watch Law and Order, right? The courtroom scene. Imagine this courtroom scene. You got the U.S. Marshals on this side, the Philadelphia police officers on this side, right? And this black woman, a black person, who's never given testimony in the courts in Philadelphia. She comes in, she's well dressed, speaks very well, and she says, "No, I wasn't kidnapped. I left on my own free will." And when she got done, as she went to get off telling her testimony, the U.S. Marshals were trying to grab her, and the Philadelphia policemen surrounded her and protected her and got her out of the courtroom. I just see that as a scene in a Law and Order movie, right? The noise of the commotion that would be, that would go on with that. William and Ellen Craft. Oh, Ellen looks. Oh, Ellen looks white, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She wasn't. Her father was a slave owner. William and her husband, they were in Macon, Georgia, around Christmas time. And around Christmas time, slave owners got kind of lax because it was holiday season, so they would be drinking and carrying on. They had a big party. So William and Ellen thought that, okay, this would be the best time for us to run away. So she dressed herself up like a man, wrapped her mouth like she had a toothache, put her arm in a sling so she couldn't write. Her husband acted like her slave. And they traveled all the way from Macon, Georgia, all the way to Philadelphia. That's how I became for it. They go to London, they come back after the Civil War, they start a school for black children in the South, Georgia, in the Clanburn School there. Now, here's something interesting. Henry Box Brown, guess what he did when he got his freedom and he went to England for a while? Guess what he did as a career?
Came out of the box, you know,
Kind of close.
on stage.
Kind of close. Well, what would be their profession? Magician. Henry Box Brown became a magician. After the war, William Still founded the YMCA, Christian Street YMCA in 1889. He led the leader in the ending of the segregation of the streetcars in 1867. He was a member of the
Philly?
Oh yes, ma'am, Philly. He was a member of the statewide colored independent party. He was neither a Democrat or a Republican. He gave an address on the voting and laboring in 1874. And I said earlier, before 1902, the obituary New York Times reported him as known as the father of the railroad. Voting, address, laboring in 1874, because he endorsed an independent candidate. And back then, most blacks were Republicans because of Abraham Lincoln. Well, people was upset with him because he didn't go with the Republican candidate. And the reason why, because he thought that the Republican Party in Philly was corrupted. Not the national, but just the gentleman who was running it. So much that they rioted and almost burned down his coal merchant business, the town, the city folks. So they asked him, and he did this in order to save his reputation. He addressed, like a town hall meeting. And in he wrote a speech and it's published. But the key to that, I always say, is that what he said to people is this: you need to take the time to learn about the candidates that you're voting for. You need to take the time to learn about the candidates that you vote for. You shouldn't just vote along the party line, but take the time. And it's so very much apropos for today's time. And I'm gonna leave that right there.
There's only one party today. It ain't for us.
Yeah. So these are actual small booklet narratives on how they desegregated the city cars. He did that along with Cato Bounds. Octavius Cato, I'm sorry, over in Philadelphia. Cato was like the young guy, right? And it was like how like we have today. You have the people from the '60s, civil rights. You got the Black Lives Matter, right? Still fighting the same fight, but just doing it differently. And that's how Octavius and William Still were. And William Still was the old guard, and Octavius saying, "We're not doing it that way. We're going to do it this way. We're going to be a little loud."
But he was murdered.
So,
Okay, this Cato.
I don't know if he was smarter. He was just younger.
I said he was murdered.
Oh yes, he was murdered. Yes,
Yeah.
he was. He was murdered. Yes, he was murdered.
For Rhoda.
Named to the Philadelphia Board of Trade by the Executive Committee to be the first African American. Now think about that. He was elected to the Philadelphia Board of Trade, which was nothing but a bunch of rich white gentlemen, and he ended up being on the Executive Committee of that Board of Trade, the first African American. His book was exhibited on the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, which is like the World's Fair. He served on the board of Orphan Asylum for children and Negro soldiers and sailors. He assisted the appointments of Philadelphia first black police officers. And like I said before, he had a successful coal and wood stove merchant business. This was in an ad, and it talks about his business prowess. We offered to William Still. We refer to William Still. He was one of the prime movers amongst the colored people in the city to secure for themselves proper means of social and intellectual advancement. And on many occasions, he has shown the most proper spirit of liberality. In his business transactions, he has also won a high reputation for integrity and promptness. North American United States Gazette, February 9, 1867. His daughter, because of her uncle being a doctor, and that you'll find out that Dr. James Still had a son that was a doctor. But William Still's daughter was influenced by her uncle, and she became the first African American woman to become a licensed physician in the city of Philadelphia. She went to Howard University. I don't have it on it, but she went to Howard first for a while, then went to Oberlin, and then she received her MD from Medical College of Pennsylvania in 1878, which is now Drexel Medical School of Medicine. She became editor. Short while there, she ended up Howard University for a short time. What else is on there? She worked a year in the England Hospital for Women and Children. She married twice. Her first husband died in 1874. And then she married a second husband, who was Reverend Matthew Anderson, who was a pastor of the Berean Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. And like I said, she was inspired by her uncle, and her uncle had a son named James T. Still that was the third graduate, African-American man that graduated from Harvard Medical School. That is a picture of the mural. William once said, "The truth certainly fears no investigation." So if you tell the truth, you don't have to worry about what you said is the truth. You can drop Mike. Truth is so twisted. Sad. Next time you go buy some stamps, better ask for them Underground Railroad stamps. William's got a stamp. Excuse me. Home with Harriet Tubman, Thomas Garrett, Harriet Jacobs. Old Freddie. Frederick Douglass and William had sort of a beef. Frederick Douglass criticized William for writing his book, The Underground Railroad. And so much so that when it was a professor at Ohio State some 25, 30 years later, wrote a book called The Underground Railroad. And he wrote to Frederick and asked him why was he not in William Still's book, The Underground Railroad. And Frederick said, because I criticized William for writing it. Frederick thought that those enslaved Africans that were on the Underground Railroad should write their own story. Well, most of them know how to read and write. So thank God that William realized it was an important thing to do. And why he knew it was so important, we'll get to that. So, bringing forward to present day, a gentleman named Paul Orevich, who's this gentleman back here, he wrote the music, and his friend Mark Campbell's not here at that trip, but Mark Campbell was the writer for the lyrics of an opera based on William Still's book, The Underground Railroad. And I can tell you when I first saw it at Princeton University, and not Princeton, yeah, it was Princeton University, right? Yeah. I teared up for the first 15 minutes of the performance because the lead vocal sung the dedication that's in the Underground Railroad book. In the story. So they invited me to the one in Princeton. They invited me to Charleston, South Carolina for a performance. Buffalo and Kentucky, where they actually did a full-blown theatrical version of it. So I'm trying to work to get it here to Philadelphia because it belongs in Philadelphia.
Yeah, definitely.
So I need to work on that. But I can tell you to see 5 African American men and women sing opera was just amazing. They were like angels. And then I had a chance to hang out with them, which you would cool. This lady here, she lives half the time in Austria or Switzerland. Because she sings over there, and she lives in Delaware, and half the year she's over there in Europe, and half the time she's over here. But just amazing. And the live theological performance was amazing. So if you hear about it coming up, and get a chance to go somewhere where it's being performed at, please, it's worth it. Truly is. But you've never been to opera or not. Now I'm trying to go to operas and learn some more about it. It was amazing. Peter Still, like I said to you, was left in slavery. His book called The Kidnapped and the Ransom. Kidnapped and the Ransom is 40 years enslavement. He was able to buy his freedom in 1850 for about $500 from the Freedman brothers, who were 2 Jewish merchants who owned Peter for a short period of time. In 1850, Freedman brothers released Peter in Ohio. There he traveled to Philadelphia, where he met his brother William, who was the secretary of the anti-slavery office. And he was calling himself Peter Freedman. So when he went in the office, he said, you know, my name is Peter Friedman, and he goes, my mother's name, I'm looking for my family, and my father's name was Lennon, and my mother's name was Sidney. And William's going, wait a minute. No one's supposed to know the information. We don't, our family don't talk about it. How do you know about this information? And about two or 3 days, he convinced Peter that that was his brother. They took him over to see Katara and Mary, who lived in the city of Philadelphia. Katara would recognize him because she was young. But after that point, William realized then, or God had him writing the narratives down. So much so that even today, people still use this book to find their ancestors. Have you heard of Charles Bloxton, the Bloxton Library over in Philadelphia, Temple? He started collecting Underground Railroad information and books, things like that, because he found his grandfather's name in the Underground Railroad and put him on a quest for over 60 years for finding stuff. So much so, there's a whole library at Temple University for Underground Railroad material. Temple University, the Charles Bloxton collection. He's buried over in Burlington City. What's interesting about his story is that, so he got free, right? So now he's like, well, I still have a family in Alabama. How he got to Alabama was that after his mother left them in Maryland, the slave owner immediately sold him and his brother to Kentucky. And then from Kentucky, they end up down in Alabama. So he gets free, and now he's like, well, I want to get my family back, right? So word gets out that this man is looking for his family. There was an Irishman who heard about the story. He was kind of an adventurer. Wasn't like a, I don't know, nobody was special, but he didn't like the fact. He wanted to help Peter out. So he organized an escape to free his family. Unfortunately, the escape plan failed. He was able to get Peter's family. They got to as far as the Columbia River. They got caught. Seth Conklin was tied up, beat up, kicked off in the Columbia River and died. Excuse me. And Peter's family was sent back down to the slave owner. Now, I'm giving you a short synopsis of this, but I'm telling you, it reads like a movie. So then he finds out that the slave owner who owned his family says, I visited Philadelphia and I ran into your brother. He disguised his name and he talked to William. And so he goes back and writes a letter to Peter and he goes, Peter, you know, your brother seems very well, you know, he's a good businessman. He looks like he's well off. So if you want your family back, I'm going to give you, it's going to cost you $5,000 to get your family back. $5,000 from today's money is like $177,000. Imagine. So Peter went around the Northeast talking about how bad slavery was, and he got donations. And within 5 years, he raised $5,000 to pay for his family and to get them out of bondage. He settled in Burlington Township, over there by the elementary school over there off of Jackson Road, if I'm not mistaken. He had a successful truck farm, a business where he grew produce and delivered food to the market. Buried over in Burlington in the common cemetery over in the center of Burlington City. Now, I always say to people, if I lived around Dr. James still time, Dr. James would be my cool uncle. I'd have been that little nephew that was on the front step when he came out. He only received 3 months of formal education. He practiced in herbal medicine He distilled medicines, extracts from roots and herbs. He studied books on anatomy, physiology, botany, and the preparation of medicines. This is a tavern that he purchased. The man that he purchased it from said to him, "Nigger Jim, I will never sell you my property." Property went up for an auction. James went around the corner and put a bid in on it. Went home thinking he wasn't going to win, but something told him later on after to go back over to see what happened. The man who won the bid couldn't come up with the rest of the mortgage, and by default, James ended up buying his tavern, and he turned the tavern into a hospital and an apartment complex.
Where's it located?
It's actually located along Medford Mahaly Road. It's not there anymore, but it's right next to the visitor center that we have for Dr. James Stewart. This historic center. This is headstone out in Coleman Town Cemetery behind Jacob's Shop, Mount Arbor. Supposedly he had a cure for scrofolia. He used stuff like Queen Anne's lace, which is a local plant, so sassafras. We don't buy some sassafras tea, right? Or use file, they call it filet. It's a seasoning that you use for Creole seeds. I think it's called filet, or file, something like that. Virginia snake root, tea berry. Have you ever had winter green gum? That's tea berry. That's what tea berry is. That's what winter green gum comes from. It's just like Dr. James, this is from the 1876 Scott Atlas. He had a 3-story mansard Victorian-style house. And this was the office. His office is still standing, but his home fell down around 1932. He sold medicines at various pharmacies in New Jersey. He developed a treatment that cured skin cancer, treated all races of people, black, white, where he came from. By the age of 70, he was the 3rd largest landowner in Berlin County. This is a ad that was in, found this online. It was found in a book, and they also sold this. I don't know who got it, but it was a picture of it, so I had someone we kind of do it. But pharmacy and training. Pharmacy and training. He had this black salve that it would cure different ailments on your skin.
Is it still there?
No, what?
96.
No, nothing. No, you know what? I haven't really checked. It might be.
Yeah, but that's the address of the printing company.
Yeah, that's the address of the printing company. Yeah, so it was Cutter's Pharmacy. So I have to look up where Cutter's Pharmacy was at. But what's interesting, celebrated cancer doctor in Medford, New Jersey. He was known as a cancer doctor. When he died in 1882, a lot of the black newspapers called him a cancer doctor. Suppose he had a cure for skin cancer.
Did they use any of his stuff to this day?
No, nothing more. Cause when he died, he didn't write a recipe book. I don't have the secret recipe book that Mom came up with. But understand this: being an herbal doctor was typical back then.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It didn't. Herbal doctors or herbalists did not become quacks until science was able to synthesize from the plants the medicines that we have today. The medical world then said, "Oh, these people were weird. You know, they're witch doctors or something." It's not true. So this right here is a testament that somebody wrote after James died, and the gentleman was I think he was a dentist or something, right? And yeah, James, he was a Reverend James Buckley. I don't know what DD means. I would think he's a dentist, right? But he's got Reverend on it, so maybe some kind of Doctor of Divinity. There you go. Thank you. So he talks about how he got a tooth pulled, I think in Connecticut, and he talks about he developed necrosis which is when your jawbone starts disintegrating, right? So he went to all these different people, and finally comes back home to the Medford area, and his mother says to him, "Go see the doctor, Dr. Still," and Dr. Still cured him. So this was in the Mahali Mirror. Just a testament of his medical prowess, right? He said he carried 3 scars from the surgical procedures, but he found to my surprise that Dr. Still understood the case, was familiar with the medical terms describing it, and marked out and explained to me the plan of the cure. I have no doubt that I owe to his treatment my recovery from the disease of 6 months duration and probably my life. In his book, The Early Recollections of Dr. James Still, he talks about how he would examine patients externally and internally to order to diagnose the fever that people had. He would first order a bath of soda water or like a weak lye solution, a sodiferric medicine given to the patient in order to reduce sweating, drink catnip tea 2 or 3 times a day. And he tried to control the fever for 9 to 10 days. He figured that the fever was the way the body was trying to expel the impurities that was happening. So he didn't try to stop the fever. He figured the fever was good, but he didn't want the fever to get too high, right? So he would control it for 9 to 10 days. 1870, he documented the first Still family reunion in his book. He took a naturalistic approach to curing ailments. His black salve was a healing ointment. His advice to young people are applicable today. And that is, stay out of the drinking houses, buy property, and give all, and let God be your guidance for your life. By the age of 50, he paid off all his debt. Then his son, Thomas Still Jr., becomes the 3rd graduate from Harvard Medical School and had quite a career in Boston, Massachusetts. He died at the age of 59 of Bright's disease, which is like a kidney disease. There's some of the quotes out of this book. The one I like to read is, "Riches are gained more by saving than by earning. It is no matter how much one earns, he can spend it all in less time than it took to earn it and still be poor. A man who is saving is often called mean and stingy. No doubt some are so, but if I have thought often, if it were not for some saving there would be no way, no one to help another one, help somebody else." A great mind is planted within us in the beginning of our lives, and like other plants, it needs cultivation and watering from the best fountains. This is Goshen Pond. I happened to be camping out there one time. That was a pretty cool picture. So you think I just came up with all this stuff, but I just figured I'd just throw out some facts and bounce it down and give you some cool stuff. No, I actually read. I try to read, right? And these are just some of the references. The three main books that kind of help the family, keep the family history together, and keep it known was The Underground Railroad, 1872. Early Recollections in the Life of Dr. James Still, 1877. Kate Picard, who knew Peter while he was enslaved down in Alabama. She was a school teacher, kidnapped in a ransom. Dr. James Still had a granddaughter named Lori Kahn, who lived up in the Boston area, and she wrote a book in 2010. If you like Philadelphia history, African American history, I would strongly encourage you to find Roger Lane's book, William Dorsey's Philadelphia and Ours. Some of Peter Still's papers. Parallel Communities by Dennis Rizzo. William was the contracting officer at Camp William Penn. The general of the Army, of the Union Army, requested William Still to take the position. He was a contracting officer, which meant that he brought all the supplies for the colored troops to be mustered and trained in Camp William Penn. Camp William Penn is on the other side of Philadelphia by Cheltenham Mall. Henry Box Sherman, the narrative. William Allen Craft. Oh, Giles Wright. How many of y'all know about the quilts? What do you know about the quilts?
They told the story of how they traveled.
Sounds good, right?
Where the house is safe or not safe.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
It doesn't.
Sounds real good. It's a good story. Think about it. How would you know if you couldn't read or write? Everybody around you, if they ever tried to write, either got the tongue cut out, got the eyes taken out, you were hung, killed. You were scared to death to pick up a pencil, right? So how would you know what a code is on a quilt if you're from Georgia and you come to Virginia? The songs are true, but you wouldn't know what a symbol looked like. So the quilts, codes on quilts is fake. So stop telling that fake one. The songs are true, because you can communicate that way, right? Follow, drinking gourd, right? Swing down, swing low, through chariot. You can sing, and no one would know what you're singing, right? Well, no, that's right.
So, my understanding was that, that, like it said, that there were people that helped you along, that you would meet them and they would tell. So that's where I had heard that.
Yeah.
For that quilt, because
It
that's.
sounds good,
Yeah.
but it's not true.
That
If
was-
you get a chance, look up Giles Wright.
Okay.
And before he passed away, he wrote some really good articles. And actually, you won't find a single book, find a single historian that writes a book about the Underground Railroad that says the quilts were used as codes. What happened was that two professors at Howard University, one was an art major, one was an economic major. They heard this story from some narrative from some former, it was the WPA project where they interviewed former slaves, and she mentioned this in the thing. And they took this and they said, oh, this sounds great. And they just expanded and blew it up, and then it became like the thing to tell in school, because it's a good story. But it's not true. Like the hush puppies. You ever seen a hush puppy? Hush puppies is a cornbread, right? You buy it down south, right? Well, the story is that slaves made hush puppies and passed it to the dogs to keep them quiet. Yeah, okay. But if you take some time and look up Giles Wright and read it, he makes a lot. I met him before he passed away, and I was amazed. I did the same thing. Oh, they use codes. He's like, how are you gonna know? You can't read or write. You couldn't read or write. And think of, you gotta understand something. When they said people were property, some places they were treated very, very bad. Africans were, my ancestors were treated horrible. They were treated like you treat a chair. You don't want the chair, you throw it out. You know? How many millions of enslaved Africans died on that middle transport? Where they got sick and they threw people off over. They treated people like they were property. Like you throw away a TV when it breaks. Like you throw away you trade in your car when your car don't run no more, right? If you have any young children or grandchildren, excellent book for them to start to understand a little bit about the Underground Railroad and William Still and Freedom. Had a chance to meet the author. He contacted me because he needs some help on understanding the history of the family. And as soon as I saw some of his work, I was like, yeah, I gotta help. So it's an excellent book. Don Tate, he's from actually Texas. If you want to know something about William Still, other than his Underground Railroad book, a man named Andrew Deemer, professor at Temple University, wrote a book called The Vigilance. And what's amazing about this book is just not about William Still. it tells you the background that was going on in Philadelphia to make William still kind of do what he was doing. And that's the only railroad book. We only have a few copies here today. Like I said, the Kidnapped and the Ransom reads like a movie to me. The early recollection of life of Dr. James Still. And then we have another book. It's William Still, and it's an interview between him and a man named James Boyd that was written. And we came out of pulled out another book and put some Underground Railroad narratives in there to make it a book. And all this was helped by Stockton University down in Rome. We partnered with them, and they've helped us reprint these books, some of these books. So this is probably what you saw years ago on Church Road out in Medford. Became a residence after the main house fell down. This is what it looked like around 2019 during the pandemic. Property got purchased in 2006 by the New Jersey DEP, and in order to preserve it, and the nonprofit that we formed works right along with the state to help do interpretive planning programs. We maintain all the 23 acres. We have about 10 acres of grass that we cut every week. It's all done on a volunteer basis. This is a picture from last year's Black Heritage sign. We're now on the Black Heritage Trail marker signs. It's funny how when you do things like this, people you have never seen before pop out of nowhere. Mayor of Bedford showed up out of nowhere. Nice gentleman, but it was just funny to me. See, where you been? Yeah, that's me with a big old. I wear cowboy hats because it keeps the sun on my bald head. Give a brother a break. This is his office, fully restored now.
Did you have a photo to base that reconstruction on? Drawing?
Yes, they did. We worked with DEP, hired a historic building architect out of Ewing, New Jersey. Annabelle Radcliffe was very strict about what the contractor could do and what he couldn't do, and what materials he could use. Very strict. The only major difference here is that the front stairs actually came out towards you to the street. Couldn't do it now because of the street. Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of James Still's son, Joseph Still,
Yes.
who bought the property at 97
97
Madison?
Madison, yes.
Okay, that is where.
Oh, did you?
his mom-
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
grew up in
So you
there.
bought it, did you, does it recently get resold?
No.
You still own it?
My mom just passed away.
And-
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because
she restored the home.
Yeah.
Did she?
Throughout. The
Yeah.
Spencers owned the home back in 1972, and then she bought the home in 1972 and lived there until January
Yeah.
this year.
You know, I met her,
Did you really?
and she every time I would see her, she'd be like, "You need to come to the house because I have something I want to show
You
you."
were welcome to come and take a look at the house.
Yeah.
we're at
And you know what's interesting about his story? Joseph went against the political power in the city of Mahal, the town of Mahal, right? And he wasn't as humble as his brother and his father. He had a white carriage, he had white horses. He was an herbalist too, but he went against the political power here. And he bankrupted, they blackballed him. And he ended up dying as a pauper. He died in an unmarked grave and got divorced from his wife, became a drunkard. And if you read Dr. Still's book, you'll think that all of his children, all 8 of his children, were these great, phenomenal people. But you know, it just tells you that you can pour onto your children all the knowledge and all the wisdom you can, but it's up to them to do something with it. Right? But yeah, we should talk afterwards. Really. We're bringing school kids. It's a 23-acre state park. We have organizations come. We did three archaeological digs. So we have about, I would say at least, we have thousands of pieces of artifacts. We have like about 100 or so whole bottles from that time. So we're working on, my archaeologists are archiving the things, and we're starting to meet and talk about how we're going to display those items to tell the story of Dr. Still. This is the site. This is Medford Mahaly Road, Church Road. So his home and office is around the corner. The visitor center that's open the first and third Sundays of each month from 11:30 to 4. We do our best to try to keep it open for our volunteers. The Boy Scouts have helped develop Nature Trail. There's a meadow, there's a butterfly garden. Now the trails are open 365 days a year, from dawn to dusk. This building here is the old building, Bunning Farmhouse, that in a sense we're helping preserve the farmhouse. The Bunning family story too. You can reach me at Dr. James Still Center at Gmail. Like I said, we're open from first and third Sundays, 11:30 to 4. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know if it relates or not, I grew up in a town called Delanco. And as a kid, we were always told not to go on this property that was dilapidated. And they always said that in that house was an underground railroad stop until we all went into the house. And what we found were, according to the tides, you could enter into this almost like an underground bay, for lack of anything else. And there were chains all over the wall.
Really?
So we think somebody got the story backwards. And I'm thinking when you were showing that trail, I'm thinking Delanco isn't that far from that trail. So perhaps, was there, I guess what I'm trying to ask, is there a known route? If you're on
No.
the Underground Railroad that you understand, oh, if you go this way, you could get caught more readily and they can put you downriver?
I understand this about the Underground Railroad. It was a loose network of people,
Okay.
right? You could be a station master, and your neighbor who lived 5 miles away from you could be a station master, right?
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No
So
more-
no.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing about it. You have to do more research on it, you know. But you know, a lot of people say there's tunnels. You know, I think that the Whitehall Mansion up in Fieldsboro says there's tunnels that go from the wine cellar out to the Delaware River.
Yeah, but what end of the story is it? And that's why I didn't know if you
Yeah.
knew something.
No,
with it,
I don't
but,
know anything about the
you
house.
know, we would go back, and of course, then you have to admit that you went where you weren't supposed to. Six were everywhere. So that was
Wasn't
totally.
it fun though?
Oh God, it was cool. It was so cool because you could go into the actual. You just had to watch the floorboards, but you could go into the whole mansion. But for us, that wasn't where the goods were. 'Cause I'm talking like 1968, so Martin Luther King, everything was happening, and so in a town that was primarily white, to those of us becoming more aware, right?
Right.
Oh, Underground Railroad, this is really great, let's go. Get your cigarettes that you're not supposed to be smoking. And go, and we're taking a hike, see it. And then we got in there, and it was like so incredibly depressing, honestly, you know?
Yeah, I can only imagine. 1932, Dr. Still's house was known that they were tearing it down because it was dilapidated. There was a gentleman who was from Camden, a white gentleman who was getting ready to go to Drexel for engineering. Him and his friend decided to go, and his friend must have lived up in the Medford area. They went into Dr. Still's house. They rummaged through it. They had grabbed a book and some sunglasses. Now, I don't know, 30, 40 years, 50 years later, whatever, longer than that actually, the gentleman's son contacts me. And he said he lived in Indiana by this time. and he was in his 70s. This is every 10 years ago, right? And he says to me, my father and his friend rummaged through Dr. Still's home, and he found these sunglasses, took a pair of sunglasses, and one of Dr. Still's original books, because supposedly he had a bunch of them left that he didn't sell. So he talked to me for an hour on the phone, all right? And then he goes, I don't know where they're at. But it was a great story, right? He says, but I know they're around, I'm gonna find them, and when I find them, I'm gonna send them to you. Now, when he told me about the sunglasses, I'm thinking he's gonna send me a pair of Ray-Bans. This guy don't know what he's talking about. He's got a book, probably got the book. Maybe he's got the 1970 book from Medford Historical Society reprinted it. That's what's going on in my head. A year later, he emails me, says, I found it and put it in the mail today. So, when I get it, it was not the original book from 1877, and it was a pair of wire frame handmade sunglasses that came in a case. And on the front of the case said A. Dorthan, who was a jeweler in Mount Holly from 1860 to 1920. So he gave me a write-up and everything, so we have that show. But again, goes to Robert to do somebody's house, right? And not thinking about.
Well, no, people, I don't think it could happen as easily today because there's laws about letting buildings fall apart and whatever.
Kids still find ways to run with
Well,
There's
yeah,
still
but-
places where people go smoke weed and
Yeah.
beer.
Certainly in city areas
Yeah,
especially.
yeah.
But these big acreages, abandoned, whatever.
Pine barrens.
Well, yeah, we can find anything for my kids.
Any other questions?
Yes. Who was Indian Joe?
Indian Joe Moore was one of the last few Indians that lived in the area, and supposedly he was a friend of the family, and he was buried out there also at this small plot out in Shimon.
There was,
I've read and heard that when Dr. Still died, he was one of the 3 richest.
Yes, three wealthiest landowners in the area. Yeah.
one of the slides had several photographs and there was a reference to a Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
He was here. What's the history?
Thomas Garrett was an abolitionist that lived down in Delaware, and he was very dedicated, and very open about him helping fugitives escape to freedom.
That's the Irish name, you know anything about him?
He's a Quaker. If you look him up, you'll see a bunch of stuff. He's got descendants, and he was quite a businessman down in Delaware and Delaware County, I believe, also.
What's his first name?
Thomas Garrett.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Go once? Twice? I'll be around for a while if you got any questions.